Thank you all for joining us at the Now What webinar series. Hey, I'm Matt Steen, co-founder at Chemistry Staffing. Really excited for everybody to be here today. Thank you guys for spending your Thursday mornings with us. Today we're kind of talking about something that I think is really important, but also I think a lot of times just kind of gets lost in the noise, and that's just communication. So I deeply believe that the church is, and pardon the phrase, is in the communications business. If we don't figure this out, if we don't do this well, we don't do our mission, which is spreading the gospel, right? And so today, I think what we wanted to spend some time talking through is just how, in the midst of all the craziness that's going on in the world, as the apocalypse descends upon us, how do we, as a church, communicate well with our congregations, with our teams, but also with the world around us. And so really excited by the crowd that's joining us today. And so let me introduce everybody that's here this morning. So first of all, Brady Shearer. Brady is the creator of Pro Church Tools and Nucleus, companies that are dedicated to helping churches navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I love that. I love that tagline. So Brady, thanks for being a part of this morning.
Grateful to be here.
So also with us is Katie Allred. Katie's co-founder of Church Communications, and she's also an assistant professor at the University of Mobile, where she also leads the school's student-run marketing agency. And she is also pretty much, the godfather of all things church communication-wise, right? You run the groups. I mean,
Kenny calls me the Oprah.
The Oprah. Okay, Oprah. That's less frightening. So that's
the
good.
Oprah of church communication.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So thanks for being here, Katie.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great. I always love talking with y'all.
Cool. Very cool. We haven't worn out our welcome yet. And so also from our team, Kelly Norris is joining us. She's been a church communicator. She planted a church. She's been an executive pastor. She currently serves as church coach with us here at Chemistry Staffing, does a whole awful lot of things, making sure that the trains run on time and keeping us from making total fools of ourselves, and also coaches church leaders on how to lead well. So Kelly, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I have a really bad habit of not introducing Todd. So Todd Rhoades is my co-founder. And so Todd, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
It's my pleasure. It really is. So let's just dive in. A couple housekeeping things before we do that, though. One, we are recording this. We'll shoot this out to everybody who has registered. If you haven't registered yet, chemistrystaffing.com/virtual, and we'll make sure that that this gets sent out to you afterwards with all the links and resources that we talk about today. Also, love to answer your questions. Just drop those in the chat or in the question feature. We'll get to those as we can, or we'll follow up with you afterwards. So let's just kind of go to this. We'll keep this kind of free flowing as much as possible, but I don't want to belabor the point that we're in unforeseen times, and it's all crazy and all that kind of nonsense, because I think a lot of marketing agencies have just beat that to snot. But we are in a place where seminary hasn't prepared any church leaders for this. So, guys, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing out there that's good. What churches are doing well communicating, how are they doing it, and what are you seeing that we ought to be thinking through and emulating?
You mean you didn't take the pandemic class?
It was at capacity, and I was waitlisted.
It was an elective, and I felt like it was very important.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that you missed out. That professor was like way ahead of their time. Anyway, I did want to talk about one thing that I think a church is doing super well. Do you mind if I actually share my screen? Is that okay?
Go for it.
Sure, why not? Okay, so here we are on Facebook, and this group is called Neela Needs. Okay, so this is Northeastern Louisiana Needs. And a church that's in our group, they created this group in response to the COVID-19 crisis. But what I love about it is actually they didn't make it related to their church necessarily. And they just wanted to make a group that could help people organize community resources and redistribute food and housing and healthcare and help people figure out what's going on during this time. Well, within 24 hours, they had 4,000 members.
Wow.
This group grew tremendously, really quickly, has had tons and tons of just really excellent feedback. And even Walmart found out what they were doing, and people who work at Walmart started donating money to help them get the groceries to the people who need them. So it's been really great. So I think that's one really great thing that a church is doing right now.
Yeah, and as an extension of that, I think it's indicative of the church getting back to its core, what makes us what we should be at our best. You know, we're so reliant on programming normally. And when that programming gets stripped away, we kind of have to revisit it. Okay, get back to the basics. And so seeing churches be the hands and feet of Christ has been amazing. Getting back to, you know, the things that we can all do, maybe just the sacraments. I was on a Instagram live the other day of a church that I'm connected to, but I don't attend in person. And, you know, I saw they were live on a Wednesday evening, and I opened it up, and it's just the pastor in their home, vertical streaming on Instagram. And they were like, we're going to lead the church through communion right now. And all I had was some water and ice and a square of dark chocolate at the time. And, you know, we went through communion together, and that was a really meaningful moment for me because, you know, again, I'm not connected to this church. I know the people, I'm friends with them, but I don't attend. And normally they only do communion on Sundays. Well, they can't do that. And so I got to be a part of that with them. And so now we have like cross church connections, which is also very cool. And especially during this time of physical distancing, that was a moment that was physically involved with the emblems, which really served a need. And it was, like I said, very meaningful.
That's really cool. Love hearing how churches are, you know, thinking out, and I hate thinking outside the box to go and do church stuff, but also be able to serve their community. So talk to us, if you guys will. I mean, talk to us principals here a little bit, right? So we've got these two great examples of what churches are doing well, right? And how they're really leveraging technology during this time. You know, what, as you talk to the churches that are in your tribe, what are you know, pushing out as principles on how to communicate well in this season?
Well, I think for us, it gets back to the philosophy and mission of each church. I think now is a great time to get back to the basics of what we're trying to accomplish as churches. The thought exercise I always ask pastors and leaders to consider is, you know, what would you post online if your Sunday service didn't exist? Which was always a hypothetical and is no longer a hypothetical. But the question really gets to the core of, what is your church trying to accomplish? What is your goal? What is your mission? Like, what does success and accomplishing fulfillment of that mission look like to you? And the problem, because we are so heavily focused on programming in the North American church, is that what can happen over time is that we conflate attendance to in-person events with fulfillment of mission, because we accomplish our mission through programming, in-person services, in-person events, groups, experiences. And so if people attend those in-person gatherings, and if more people attend, we must be fulfilling our mission to a greater degree. But that's a pretty narrow way of viewing things. It's like stepping on the scale and looking at the number without any other context in a vacuum and saying, this number is going up or going down, that's good. Well, that number could go in either direction. It could mean good or bad. Sometimes it fluctuates without any cause whatsoever. Church attendance is very much the same way. And so as we get back to the core of why we're doing what we're doing, I think this is an amazing time to recalibrate and reevaluate, what does success look like for our church? You know, we know we're trying to make disciples, and that's a difficult thing to calibrate. And so I don't think that, I'm not trying to blame churches with this, because we're talking about existential matters of faith and life and destiny. Like, these things aren't as simple as looking at like gross revenue for a business would be. But I do think that there are more helpful indicators that can help us get a more holistic view on what our church is doing. And then from there, we can make better decisions and set our churches on more accurate trajectories for the next 12, 24 months.
I think too, we need to rethink what evangelism looks like in churches. I think that we have had a time where, you know, we think we really have to like physically go to people, and obviously that's not always what we can do. Of course, there are plenty of opportunities for healthcare. We can get involved in healthcare and stuff like that right now. But two, I think that right now the online church is such a great place to do digital evangelism. getting involved in community networks that are on Facebook, that are on Instagram, reaching out to people who have needs, like refiguring out what that looks like. I think it's going to be really important. We're still trying to figure out what does discipleship look like, right? Like we're doing these Zoom classes and we're doing these things, but don't forget about evangelism and doing it intentionally during this time too.
Yeah, I think that's great. The whole numbers thing really fascinates me. Numbers and pastors, growing up Baptist, always, you always hear what are the real numbers and what are the Baptist numbers. I can say that because I was one. But numbers talk fascinates me. I saw a statistic, and everybody's kind of pulling out different numbers, right? But I saw a statistic a couple weeks ago, I think right before Easter, or right after Easter, that said 49% of churches are growing right now. And I thought, that's a really cool stat, but I'm not sure that I believe that. First of all, because everybody's using different numbers, and everybody's measuring something different. So some people are measuring, people that are there for the whole service online. Other people are measuring 6 second, if you're on there for 6 seconds, I'm going to count you. Some people are saying, I'm going to take that number and times it by 2.3. Others are saying 3.2. There's no standard out there for that. So I'd love to hear you guys both talk a little bit about that. And then Brady, I love what you said about we need to relook at what we're actually measuring. And I think there's a huge difference between attendance and engagement. And I think we're all still trying to figure this out. Would love to hear from both of you. That first question, and then a follow-up would be, what should we be looking at? I mean, what kind of metrics should we be looking at as we take from in-person services to online?
Who's multiplying their engagement rates? That's probably not what you should be doing, I don't think, personally. I do think it's probably more than 15-second watches, that's for sure. I mean, who has watched it in completion? But at the same time, like, I don't know if who's watched it in completion is the right number either, because there will be a lot of people who will step and walk away from it, or have started midway or something like that. So that's not really fair. And so I think it's maybe like people will watch it more than a minute. I think Brady will probably have some other things to add to it.
Yeah, so we like to encourage churches to track next steps, which is any intentional move that someone makes towards Jesus. And then what we ask churches to do is define all of the next steps that are unique to them and put them in a spreadsheet. We were talking before we opened up this call live about my love for spreadsheets. Just such a spreadsheet nerd. Now, there are a lot of next steps that virtually every church has: baptisms, giving, volunteering, attending a small group, signing up to serve, praying, submitting a prayer request, and then all of the digital metrics that are a lot easier to track because of the platform's ability to do all that legwork for us. But then there are things that are unique to you and your church as well. But once you start adding them up, you'll probably get anywhere between 10 and 20 individual next steps that are happening pretty frequently in your church that really matter to you and are indicators that people are taking intentional steps towards Christ. Because that's what we're trying to accomplish. Like, we all say it differently, but it's the Great Commission, the greatest commandments: love God, love people, make disciples. And our visions may word those, articulate them differently, but at the end of the day, we're all trying to do the same thing. And then what you can do once you've written down all of those different next steps is you can weight them differently. Because a person attending a service, which is one of the next steps we should track, part of this holistic approach, that is a next step that counts. But if someone got baptized, well, we should count that for more, because that's a lot more meaningful and substantive. So then what you can do in your spreadsheet is you can weight each individual next step based on how much you as a church think it's meaningful. And we've created this spreadsheet already. It's free. You don't have to sign up for an email or anything. If you search Pro Church Tools Church Growth in Google, you can find it. It's a downloadable spreadsheet on Google Sheets. Again, no opt-in or anything. So that you can use as a template. And then what you can do, you plug in all the numbers week after week, month after month, and we don't have benchmarks for these. So you don't need to look at that and be like, what's a good number? Well, it's all about your church improving and getting better month over month, year over year. And so you start tracking things. And after 30, 60, 90 days, you'll start to get a pretty cool view of what's happening in your church. And you can see when spikes happen. You can see when dips happen. And then you can look at those moments of time because they're all time stamped and ask yourself, okay, what did we do here that may have contributed to this spike or dip? And then you can get feedback, not you anecdotally looking at things from the outside because you're biased and you have blinders on, because we all do when we look at our own things that we love. You can get real data and say, oh, this is what resonated with our community. This is what really propelled them forward towards Jesus. Let's do more of that. And inversely, do less of what hasn't resonated. And that will help, again, with making better decisions. And so that's a great place to begin. And then if you want me to keep going on, there's one more thing that I think is especially helpful. And it's recognizing that the continuum of someone being far from God to becoming more and more like Jesus every day, the process of sanctification. It's not a light switch that goes on and off. It's a slider, and people are continually taking steps forward, sometimes 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and there's no end to it. But there's also no moment that like quantifies, okay, we've accomplished something. This is another notch in the belt, and we've done what we are required to do as churches. And so we like to put it on this ladder. We call it the Next Steps ladder. And it's easy to remember because the acronym is ACDC. And the bottom is awareness. And then 1 step up is connect. The next one is decide. And the final one is commit. And the goal that you're trying to do is always move people up the ladder. That's the ideal linear progression of someone connecting to your church. And what's amazing about the first 2 steps is that they're virtually the same for every single organization. They're not church specific. Awareness and connection. And so this is why we publish at my company so much content online, because we need people to be aware of pro-church tools before we could ever get them to, become a subscriber or purchase any of our products. But the trouble that churches have, this is the right mirror, is that we try to get people from the bottom to the top right away. So we want them to become aware of us and then become committed right away. But it's just not realistic to move people that quickly. If you discover me on YouTube, you're not going to become like a 3-year subscriber to Nucleus within 1 view. But if you become aware of me on YouTube and I ask you to subscribe, then maybe you'll move up to that connect stage. And then eventually maybe I'll say, hey, we have this free download. You just have to enter your email. And then you move to the decide stage. And then maybe you start a free trial of a product. And then eventually you sign up and then you get to the commit stage. And so the same thing is for your church. With digital, and I know I'm going long here, I'll wrap this up quickly. You're going to get a lot more width and less depth. In-person ministry, it's going to be a lot more depth, less width. One isn't better than the other, but you need to treat them differently. You're probably seeing your scope of distribution increase pretty dramatically with online ministry. But people are also able to get up and leave from a service, which otherwise would not be possible in an in-person gathering, lest it be awkward. Sure, it could happen, but not usually. And so we're in that aware stage a ton right now. And all of what you're doing right now online is trying to get people from aware to connect. Get them to get in touch with a DM with a pastor. Get them to sign up for a digital connect card. Get them to text in the code and get connected that way. And then you can move people from there.
That's awesome. Now I'm curious to hear from you guys. You mentioned you need to be tracking the things that that are resonating more with people, just so you can have data, and to be able to figure out, we need to do more of that. I'm wondering if there's anything that's surprising you guys that has been resonating with people and helping people take steps that you would have, 6 weeks ago said there ain't no way that's ever going to work. Is there anything that just kind of caught you off guard like that? That's a really unfair question, I know.
Sorry, I was getting the link to the spreadsheet to share.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, can you explain the question one more time?
No, I can't. So basically, here's what I'm curious. You guys are talking to a ton of churches, and I'm sure you're hearing stories of certain things that they've done digitally that have resonated and connected with people way more than other things. And I'm just wondering if there's anything out there that we just wouldn't think about. Things that you would have said 6 weeks ago. That's the dumbest idea ever. But has actually worked out really well. Is there anything like that's just surprised you guys?
I think the idea of online community has really come out for a lot of churches, and figuring out what that looks like. I know our church, the church I attend now, they put out that anybody could join a virtual small group. And I think they saw like a flood of people, not just people from our church joining those. And then 2, they even decided to do Financial Peace University and gave out 100 free kits to Financial Peace. And we've been doing it online as a study. And that's been going really well, I think, for our church. So I think it's interesting. We've definitely had to pivot a lot. But I think the fact that churches can reach out and do these different things has really been interesting.
Yeah. Almost seems like so much of what we're doing is going old school, leveraging the technology, but going to the old school. I mean,
it's the old evangelism, just a new way of doing it.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun, right? We're still like doing these interest-based, and that's something I've talked about for years. You can create these interest-based Facebook groups or online communities, just like you would create interest-based groups in person and meet. It's just a different medium.
Yeah. That's awesome. So much of the theme of these conversations has been, this whole thing is forcing us to go back to the block and tackle pastoring and the block and tackle church stuff, the base, not the hazers, not the skinny jeans and all that kind of stuff, but it's just like, get in people's lives, connect with people, do the touches. It just looks so much different these days. So
what are you gonna do with all my skinny jeans?
That's
It's
an
just
image.
a question, just for later.
Image I didn't need, Todd. Thanks for that. Thanks for adding value to the conversation. So anything that surprised you, Brady?
No, I think I would push back on the question. I don't think that there is this. I think that what we do is we often look and like, oh wait, what's this thing that we're unaware of? Mm-hmm. That once we uncover it, that's going to be the key to accomplishing all of these things that we're having struggles with. And I think that a lot of this stuff is very simple, not necessarily easy. And anything that has to do with online content, so much of it is putting in the work of making the next right decision for a decade. Mm-hmm. And that's not really glamorous to talk about. And we all need quick wins, which are important to kind of like get us the belief that we can do this. But at the end of the day, online ministry is much like in-person ministry. It's getting in the trenches. It's getting your hands dirty. Like some of this stuff doesn't scale. We're trying to encourage churches to, especially with the demographic of 40 and under, like to move people to direct messages, because that's where the real ministry is going to take place. Those 40 and over, to cast a broad stroke, generally more willing to comment and engage publicly on platforms, whereas those 40 and under, they're a lot more into the private messaging. So moving people to DMs, because once you can, that's where so much of the in-person ministry can go. And some of the questions we get are, okay, how do we automate that? And I say, well, please don't. Just like you wouldn't automate any pastoral ministry, this digital ministry is the same. And what's amazing about digital is that, there are more people that are introverts than extroverts in the world. And that means that a lot of our in-person experiences aren't necessarily tailored for those that are a little bit more uncomfortable with in-person interactions. And these digital interactions make it a lot easier for those people to connect. And so you might actually be reaching people in your church in ways that you never were before, even though they were already connected to your church, just because maybe they're not going to go out of their way to approach someone and say, I need prayer for this. Go out of their way to hand in a connect card. Go out of their way to lead a small group. But suddenly the ability to engage digitally, where they can like spend 5 minutes to put in their tailored response to make sure they get their words right. Because in person, maybe they're not as comfortable speaking and they don't feel like they can capture their thoughts the way they hear it in their head. And so they've had enough moments where they thought they came off silly. And so now they just don't talk as much as maybe they'd like to. And so that's also great news. But I think about this Last Dance documentary. I don't know if anyone's watching it. It's the Jordan documentary. And, it's the only thing on sports right now. So it's like all I'm watching. Yeah. And there have been 3 different occasions in these first 4 episodes, the only 4 that have been released so far, that have just blown me away. And each have been with Michael Jordan being interviewed. The first was him recounting hitting the game-winning shot in the national championship game as a rookie. He said, that's when I stopped being Mike Jordan and I became Michael Jordan. And it was the first step towards greatness in my basketball career because I suddenly had confidence that I could do it. And I was like, what? Like, Michael Jordan is one of the most dominant athletes of all time. You know, I didn't grow up in the 90s watching him, but when I hear about it, everyone would say there was just this certainty, this inevitability when you'd be watching. It didn't matter if the other team was winning. You knew that Jordan was going to end up and the Bulls were going to end up winning. It didn't matter. It was like a foregone conclusion. And so to hear him speak about that and talk about how there was a time when even he was uncertain about his own abilities, and it took something going right for him to have the confidence to try something else. And then he talks about overcoming the Pistons and being like, that's when I started becoming a champion. And the team started realizing that we could be champions. And there was another moment like that later on. And it's this like gradual process of him becoming more confident, of his team, just like your church's team becoming more confident. A lot of us approach digital and we're like, you know what? Our church has no strengths here. We do not have the content creators. We do not have the expertise. We do not have the experience. None of us do. Until you do something and it works and you're like, oh, wow. The first time I ever made $1 online because I run a business, I called my mom and I was like, Mom, we made $1 online. She was helping me with my WordPress. And she's like, really? I love you, son. I believe in you. I didn't think it was actually possible. And then you make it, and they're like, well, if we made $1, what if we just replaced our income? Or what if we like built a business? Same thing with like online. It's like, if I could get 1 like, why not 10? Why not 100? And so you kind of have to like build your own confidence and belief, because even the great ones, the most dominant in their own fields, look to Michael Jordan, at one point or another needed the ball to go through the basket for them to say, maybe I could do this.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about you basically, I mean, what you're saying is just dive in and get to work, right? Start doing the work. And so a lot of the churches that we talk to, a lot of the churches that we're that are in our sphere, smaller churches, don't necessarily have the big budgets, don't necessarily have the whole teams and all that stuff ready to go. Where do they start?
With their iPhone.
With their iPhone. Okay. What is it okay if I have an Android?
Yeah, that's fine too. Whatever you have. Like, I don't think you have to today go and buy a bunch of fancy equipment. Get started with what you have, and then as you grow, you can get other equipment if you need to. But I wouldn't go spend all your money today. And I've encouraged churches in the last month, really, like, don't go out and spend a ton of money. Like, instead, spend that money on your people who probably need it more, or spend it on outreach or whatever. But use what you have available, right? Jimmy Fallon right now, I think, is a great example. Okay. Jimmy is recording the entire Tonight Show on his iPhone with his wife recording him. Okay. So it's not that, and of course his wife is a director. So, I mean, we got to give her a little credit. But at the same time, like, it's not overly produced. I love that his children are a part of it. And that, it's really it's just authentic. And I think people are really wanting that, especially right now. But I don't feel like you have to go out and buy a ton of equipment today. You can, like, that's fine. Like, and there are resources that tell you how to do it and what you should buy. And of course, in our group, you can ask, and people will give you a lot of opinions. But at the same time, I don't feel like it's completely necessary until you have proven that you are willing to put in the work with the equipment you have today.
Yeah, and it can be a lot of work to get this up and running. With most churches being small, and maybe they don't even have a communications person on staff, where should their efforts go? I know you said iPhone, but what are the top things that they should be doing if they don't have a communications person, or they just have a part-timer on staff who's basically running the show right now due to this pandemic? What are maybe the 3 top things that they should be focused on?
Katie, do you want to take that? I don't want to interject.
No, you go for
answer. Okay. So again, broad stroke, those that are 40 and up, going to be spending more time on Facebook. 40 and under, more time on Instagram. 20 and under, TikTok. So those are the platforms, depending on who you want to reach, that you'd be wanting to be focusing on. And then when it comes to content, as much one-to-one interaction that you can generate with your church congregation, the better. So a lot of us look to the bigger churches because they are bigger churches, and we model our efforts after them. You are not Stephen Furtick because your church is bigger than your online audience. Think about it this way. If you're looking at these big churches, these big influential pastors, and I'm not disparaging them whatsoever, their online attendees dwarf their in-person attendees. There are millions of people that are watching their messages online, tens of thousands in person. Tens of thousands of in-person people is a lot, but that's like 1/10, 1/20th of their online reach. And so much of their content is made for online only. They don't have as much of that in-person engagement happening online, or that congregational engagement happening online, because that's not what their online platforms are for. That's what their in-person gatherings are meant to facilitate. So we don't want to model our efforts after them, because it's like if I ran a local cafe and was like, what is Starbucks doing? Well, they're a multinational chain. Yes, we both make coffee, but organizationally, we have almost nothing in common. So Facebook groups, a great way to generate engagement, not just you broadcasting from your church so that people can consume the content, but back and forth conversation. And then, like I said, starting direct message threads for those that are 40 and under. One of my friends, he pastors a small church, rural Canada, about 100 people. And what they've had great success with their young adults and youth are Instagram chats that limit the number of people. I don't know if Katie knows offhand. It's like, 20, 30, 50. I don't know the number of people that can be in there. And it's like this just ongoing group text, group chat with all of the youth and young adults. And, pastors are jumping in, the leaders are jumping in. And sometimes it's just like sharing funny memes, funny jokes. But then sometimes someone says, I'm having a bad day. Could someone pray for me? And then everyone's praying for that person. And again, you might not see that demographic engage in that way in a Facebook group, but you will see it behind the scenes in these private chats. And because all of us under 40 are, conditioned to FOMO, we want to be part of those chats, because if we aren't, something could be happening in there. Parties could be being planned, not anymore, but once we get back to seeing people in person, and we don't want to miss out on that. And so that's an easy way to connect with people. Again, like those are the things that you don't see the big churches doing because they don't need to. And so we don't usually default to that type of content strategy. But that's where, again, in the trenches, being practitioners, where the real pastoral ministry is taking place.
And too, the bigger churches can't go. What you can do, like really specifically for a smaller church, if there's 50 people who like your Sunday stream, why don't you message all 50 people who have liked it and say, hey, thanks for liking this. What did you learn? Like, what can we be praying for you during this time? Like, go ahead and reach out specifically to every single person who engaged and commented, liked, shared it, and say, hey, we really appreciate you doing this, like, what can we be praying for you? And you'll find that people will do it more so just because you reached out and talked to them about it. That's what happened, in ChurchCom, the early day of ChurchCom. This is my secret. I messaged every single person who was in the group, like all the time, very consistently when we were under 2,000 people. And so I just wanted everybody to feel like they were loved and known and cared about. And then I think churches that are really small, you have this great ability to reach out to people online really quickly. So it's not like this is going to take all day for you. It'll take 30 minutes tops. But I think it will multiply your reach for sure. So yeah,
if there's one thing you take from this, it's that. Like, that is what we did at Pro Church Tools. Not we. There was no we then. I'm responding to every comment. And even today, I'm responding to every DM and Instagram. Does that scale? No. There's tens of thousands of churches. And guess what? They all want my advice right now. And I am responding to every single one. Because when you get that real one-to-one engagement with, you're like, whoa, this is a real person. They're just not, you're not a celebrity. You're not Furtick, You're not Steph Curry. You're not any of these people that are on Instagram doing their lives that don't need to interact. They also can't interact, right? So it's not even that they don't need to. They can't do what you can do as a small, agile unit. And even, us, 75,000 churches on the email list, we're still doing these agile, non-scalable, non-automated things because we know that when you have that one-to-one interaction with someone, it can change their entire view on your organization and you as a church. They're that much more likely to share next time. They're that much more likely to view and like. And people say, how do we get people to share? Like, ask, DM them and say, can you share this? This is why it's important. And to go off of this as like a really tactile thing you can do, and this comes from our friends at Sunday Social. I saw them post this on their Instagram the other day. What you can do is in any of your live experiences, any of your posts, pin a comment with the one action you want people to do, and then ask them to like that to invest into that action. What I mean by that is, hey, if you're new and watching this, like this comment and we'll follow up with you. And then again, you do that same thing. You go to their profile and follow up with a real person typing into the thread.
Right.
If you'd like to learn about committing your life to Jesus, like this comment. If you want us to pray with you, like this comment. You can't do all of those. Choose the one that's most important to you. Because sometimes we can say something like, comment the word new and we'll get in touch with you. It's a little awkward to comment the word new. Not that people won't do it, but more people will connect if all they have to do is like something. We want to maximize the number of people we can follow up with. So those are some really tactile things you can start doing this week.
I love that. And I think as a church communicator, we had this big red light in giving access to our Instagram and social platforms to our pastors. What's a way to involve our pastors? I know even at Chemistry Staffing, we've talked about how a lot of people are shifting their job descriptions, right, in this season because it looks different. We can't be doing exactly what we did before. How do we involve our pastors to do pastoral care through social media without giving them the keys to the kingdom? Or do
I'll
we?
go. No, so this touches on a number of things, and we're in this really tricky time where the vast majority of senior leaders are 55 to 65 in evangelical churches in North America. And the truth is that to do social media well, you can't really hand it off. Mike Todd, Transformation Church, having a moment right now. He was on Church Pulse Weekly with Carrie Newhoff this week. Carrie asks him, who's doing your social? Like, how does your team do so much? And he's like, I still do 60% of my own social media. He's got 1 million followers on Instagram, one of the biggest YouTube channels of any church. Church is tens of thousands of people, blowing up, and he's still doing 60% of his own social. It's like saying, how can like a pastor preach if they're not going to be the one doing the research? Like it's just something that almost can't be reconciled. So getting your pastor involved, one of the easiest ways to do it is to get them involved in this pastoral ministry that's taking place on a one-to-one level. So what you can do is you can set up workflows where that one-to-one is being facilitated through their Facebook page, through their email, through their direct messages, whatever platform they're comfortable with. At the very least, your pastor should have some context for replying to personal emails. And what's great about doing it through, again, these digital means is that it doesn't require an in-person interaction. So what I mean by that is that your pastor might get off the stage from preaching on a Sunday and they're like worn out because they've had a week of prep. They gave it all. They left it all on the floor, to use a sports analogy. And now a bunch of people want to talk to them. And, a lot of pastors are introverts. Just because they preach doesn't mean that they get recharged by interactions with people. And so now they got a ton of people coming up to them, and those people are like putting all of these weighty matters that we deal with in church onto the pastor. It's difficult. You start facilitating a lot of that through email. When the pastor is recharged, maybe it's a morning after their coffee, whatever it might be. When the pastor is recharged and ready, they can then go into those emails. And if there's a 24, 48-hour delay to those getting responded to, that's okay. That's normal email etiquette. Nothing wrong with that. And now that pastor is still making those one-to-one interactions. They're doing it through social. I count email as social. And they're also doing it in a way that is sustainable for them long-term. And what happens is, again, going back to that Michael Jordan analogy, it's like once they see the real difference they can make with someone over email, now they're excited to try something else. A lot of times we don't try things. It's just like, no one likes change. You start to get those small wins, real people being ministered to, and you start to build up the belief and confidence, even in a pastor that's older. Older makes it more difficult, doesn't make it impossible. It's all about how you approach it and your willingness to learn.
Yeah. Well, let me push back on you a little bit here, Brady, because here's where I think the disconnect is, and everything is changing so quickly. And I love going back to your line that this is, the biggest communication change in 500 years. I think it's really true in a lot of different ways. It's a paradigm shift for many pastors, small to medium-sized pastors. Let's talk about them in particular, that have spent, just because of our church model here in North America, spent so much of their time preparing for the platform. Okay. And the platform's gone, right? At least initially. So initially when the platform was gone, we thought the platform would be gone for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. Now it's like 4 weeks. Now it's like 8 weeks. Now it's like maybe next June, who knows, right? But I think a lot of pastors have that platform mindset because that's what the normal was. That's what we're used to. And now we're butted up against having to do a lot of things online. And when you're talking about DMing and Instagram and TikTok or TikTok, or I mean, that's what people are, I don't know what it is. They don't even know what that is because it's just a totally different platform for them. I think the pushback with a lot of pastors is, look, I don't want to be DMing people all day long. I hate email. I don't want to be emailing people all day long. I've got really important stuff to do, like this platform stuff that I'm good at, that I know how to do really well. And it's much easier, honestly, to think that, oh, we're all going to be meeting back together soon and our online numbers are up. I think we asked this before, not that you didn't answer it, both of you, but what's the first step? Because this is not just a platform issue, it's a paradigm shift that is just, it's going to be really hard. It's a really hard adjustment for everybody to make. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been asking and imploring churches to make this paradigm shift for 10 years now.
Yeah, long before the virus, right?
We've received so many direct messages and emails from the last month or two of churches being like, thank you so much for saying this. We were ready for this. And
it's
that's
not because church leaders are lazy, right? It's not because they don't want to do the work. It's that they don't, it's just totally different.
Well, and one of them is like, it's just time intensive. I mean, What I'm doing right now for myself is I'm taking this time and space where some of my responsibilities no longer exist to invest that time and creative energy into things that I should have been doing a long time ago. Like, for example, there have been a lot of changes to our video production workflows that I wanted to make, but we got to pump out multiple, videos every single week. I didn't really have time to redo the entire workflow. Well, now I had some extra creative space and energy, and I've been reworking all of those workflows. So when we get back to whatever our new normal is, all of those improvements will be made with that extra time and space that I had. So if you have been putting this stuff off, really you have two options. I would love to see churches embrace this new digital paradigm. Many won't. That's their call. And I can't force anyone to do that. When the printing press, which is that 500 years reference we're making, when the printing press came out, we have the history. A lot of churches thought it was a bad idea. A lot of churches resisted. We do not want the average person reading the Bible. This is not going to be good. This is the wrong thing. And yet, the Bible to this day is still the most widely sold and distributed book of all time, which means we were able to navigate that communication shift even amidst the resistance. My hope is that the same will happen this time. We're just in the middle of that resistant period right now. But this pandemic is offering this time and space where so much of our programming is no longer happening, so much time and space for us to pick up new skills and learn things while we have that extra time. And so there's never been a better time to engage that. Like you said, where to start? Start with email. Like, you know how to do email. If you say you don't want to do any pastoral care through email, then okay, that is your call, your choice. And I will, more power to you, all respect to you. But then what I don't want is for you to come to me through a DM and be like, we're not seeing the engagement we are online. It's your choice, right? Like, this isn't, it's not a good thing or a bad thing. Either you want to reach young people and make this digital paradigm shift and you do the work, or you don't do the work because you prefer not to and stay where you are right now. And that is totally fine. You just have to be okay with the decision that you made. Like, if I want to lose weight, if I want to be the healthiest version of myself, I have to say no to things. And I have to say yes to things I don't want to say yes to. If I don't make those decisions, then I can't have the healthiest version of myself that I want. And we can't have both.
Yeah, it seems like so many of our churches and so many of the stories that I'm hearing, Todd's been hearing, Kelly, I mean, we're all hearing these, right? It doesn't seem like there's a middle ground. It seems like there's a lot of churches that we'll talk to that say, hey, our giving's up, our engagement is going through the roof and all this kind of stuff. And then there's churches where it's like our giving is, cut in half. Our giving is way down. Everybody just kind of seems like, we're just kind of in this malaise, and you have the conversation between the two, and the mindset of the churches that are just kind of hanging on, or the ones that are just kind of waiting to get back to normal, right? That are just dying to have, like, Georgia roll back the restrictions so that they can get in person. Where the churches that are crushing this, I mean, they've repurposed their whole staff to go and make phone calls, on a weekly basis, and are sending out, personalized messages to everybody that gives on a regular basis. And they're actually killing So I think you guys are dead on. Katie, I mean, what are you seeing like this? I mean, is this? I'm guessing it's not just Brady, but I mean, what?
Yeah.
Talk to
I
us.
had a local church call us. Actually, it's funny. I had a local church call me, and I have no idea how they got my number. Like, I don't know. Is there like list of numbers that are local? And it's funny though, because I don't even have a local number. So like how they found out, maybe, I don't know. I have no idea. But I had a local church call me on my cell phone, and what they did, it was interesting. The first thing they said is, "Hello, I'm not a telemarketer." They were like, "We're just sharing scripture with people and offering to pray with them. Is there anything that you need prayer about?" And I was like, this is interesting. So I spent some time talking with her just about what they were doing and how they were doing it. And she was like, "I get a lot of people like automatically hanging up on me." But she was like, "You will be surprised how many people really need prayer right now, like desperately need prayer." And so I think that this is a great time to make the effort, right? Exactly what you're saying, Matt, like reposition your church staff, right? Your worship leader may not be doing the things they were doing before, getting ready for Sunday morning in the past, but can they make calls? Can they follow up on Facebook comments, DMing people? Can they go on Instagram and DM people? Yes, they can, 100%. And so even if your pastor can't be the one who's individually going after all of these people, somebody on your staff should be. And so just making sure that like, and even if y'all split it up, right? Like you say, this person's doing Instagram, this person's doing Facebook or whatever. It's just really important that we make those changes.
That's awesome. So quick story. You guys didn't want this, so this is for free. But I've been reached out to twice since the pandemic started, right? By Bayside Church out in the Sacramento area, right? They called me like 2 weeks into this. I've been there 3 times in my life. The last time was like 24, 30 months ago, right? First thing they said, "Hey, how are you doing? Is there anything we can bring to you? What's going on?" Just similar to the call you had, Katie. And then the second one was a text message last night just saying, "Hey, we're still praying for you. What do you need?" That kind of stuff. It's like, dude, you guys are killing it. It has been so long since I've stepped foot there. I think that's awesome. Let me ask you guys this, okay? So you got all these different platforms. You got email, you got your text messages, you got phone calls, DMs, and I'm 44, so you were saying something along the lines of like direct messaging and all that kind of stuff that just kind of flew over my head because I'm too old to use it apparently. But I mean, you've got all these different platforms where if we're going to pick one or two, and I know part of this is age dependent and all that kind of stuff. I mean, what's going to be the most effective for a church of 30 people that are just trying to scrape by?
I think Facebook's probably still the best place for that.
Is it? Even more so than like working the phones and all that kind of stuff?
I think that people are more likely to answer a Facebook message than they are to answer a phone call.
Really? Okay. So deploy your people on Facebook Messenger, just kind of going after everybody that likes your page and all that kind of stuff, or how would you do that?
I wouldn't say necessarily people who like your page, because I don't even know if you can access that list. I think it would be more specifically people who are liking your post.
Okay.
And then making sure, just like Brady said, asking those specific call to actions, right? Like this post to do this, do that, or do a call to action where you fill out a form. But just making sure like there's very intentional call to actions throughout your messaging.
Gotcha. That's awesome. Brady, what would you add?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I think there are certainly churches, perhaps on this call, 30 people. If your congregation is 60, 65 plus more, then I'd probably start with the phones. I think so. That's a smaller minority of church demo.
Yeah.
But if that's you, that might be the way to go. You mentioned TikTok briefly. I am spending a lot of time on TikTok. I have been on social now, doing it professionally for 10 years. I am struggling with TikTok. I struggled with Snapchat when it first came out.
Thank you.
And you know what I'm doing? I'm publishing on it every single week, multiple times, because I am going to figure it out. because I know that if I want to reach people that are going to be 25 and under, but if it hits critical mass, the world, I need to be able to publish on TikTok. And forget about TikTok for a moment. It is popularizing a new form of video content, which is short form performative videos. It was like when Snapchat came out, we're like, not going to go on Snapchat. This is silly. Until stories became like the #1 fastest growing social platform medium across YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. And then Twitter's experimenting with it now. So if you don't learn these new platforms when they come out, you might not even know how to storytell in the new format. And so it just hits me just a tiny little bit when people are like, I'm this age, I'm not going to learn that. Again, that is your choice. The neuroplasticity in our brains remains. I am struggling through TikTok and is the first one that I'm really struggling through, but I will figure it out if I just stay in the trenches long enough and I keep publishing and I keep getting feedback and I keep seeing, okay, that didn't work, this did, adjust here, change that, and eventually you figure it out. But we're living in this digital world where things aren't going to change. New platforms are going to keep dropping. New paradigms are going to keep shifting. So you can either say, I'm going to be the type of person that's going to continue to learn it, or I'm not going to continue to learn it. If you care enough, you'll learn it. Like right now, I'm opening a pool in my backyard for the first time. This morning I had to go out, dumped a bunch of salt in it. I don't know what I'm doing. Physical labor, like the real components of the earth, granite, liners, water, salts, chemistry. I don't know, but I want to swim in the pool and I want my family to be able to. So I will learn it. I will figure it out, even if it is difficult. And this pandemic, all it's doing is like turning up the volume of what has already been happening for 10 years to 11. Church attendance has been in considerable decline since 2010 across every single demographic, every single generation. All that this is doing is showing us what's been happening in a crazy, intense way. But this is not going to disappear. Yes, we'll get back to in-person gatherings eventually, but those that are 40 and under, the millennial generation that Pew released this week has officially now surpassed the boomer generation in overall population size. We do not treat church in the same way those 40 and over do. We just don't, because we grew up with the internet. So that's what we know. And if you're going to continue to do church one way, it might work for another 5 years, 10, 20, who knows? But eventually, this new paradigm will need to be contended with. You can either say, we're just not going to adjust with it and we will go extinct, or we're going to find our way through it. Doesn't mean you need to do TikTok necessarily. Doesn't mean you need to do any of these things, but you've got to figure out what works for you.
That's awesome. I don't think you're passionate about that at all either. So I think that's seriously. Thank you for that. Okay, guys, I want to be respectful of your time. We said that we'd get you out of here before too awful long. One last question, then we'll kind of wrap this up if that's okay. One thing churches need to be thinking about for the future, right? 6 months, 12 months, 5 years. What's the one thing that you would be saying to churches? Hey, figure this out quickly.
Measurement. You got to know how you are indicating health and growth. It's what drives your decisions. It's what drives your trajectory. All of these other things are superficial. Why are you doing TikTok? Why am I doing TikTok? It's not because I think TikTok is cool. It goes back to my mission and how I'm trying to fulfill that mission. Yeah. You need to make sure you can accurately and reliably measure your church's overall health and growth. Otherwise, all of this stuff, it's like trying to get somewhere with a compass that doesn't point north.
Yeah. That's awesome. I think figuring out community is going to be important, and because I don't think we're going to get back into a church building the way we once did very, very quickly. And so can we figure out house church? Can we and figure out live streaming? Can we figure out what community looks like on Zoom? I think that's going to be important probably for the church for the next year, honestly.
Yeah. That's huge. So thank you guys. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate the wisdom that you guys are sharing with our churches. Grateful for the opportunity just to spend an hour or so with you guys today. So thank you for that. For those of you that are playing along at home, just a heads up, next week, we're going to be continuing our conversation. We're going to be talking about what family ministries need to be looking like this summer. When we can't do VBS or youth camp or that kind of thing, we've got Jess Beeler, Caleb Smith that are going to be joining us for that. It's going to be a really good conversation. One other thing, just to kind of let you guys know, Chemistry has a webpage up. It's chemistrystaffing.com/COVID. All of our COVID-19 related resources and all of that can be found there. One of the things that we do want to talk about, though, real quick, is the virtual strategy lab. We're getting ready to launch our second. It is the first one filled up pretty quickly. Second one is just about filled up. And so these are all tuition optional. We understand the reality of our situation. So would love for you to be able to check that out. chemistrystaffing.com /labs. So thank you guys again for all of your time. We'll be sending out all the links that we talked about on this conversation, as well as more information about Brady and Katie in the email that goes out shortly after we wrap up. So thanks, guys.